Glimpses from the battlefronts of the world to show how training pays off. These mountainous impasses were once traversed by the Romans. Now U.S. troops, conditioned for this terrain, ever cautious of their footing, plod their way up the hazardous trail. Our attack has been held up by heavy machine gun and mortar fire. An observation post established, M4 tanks are ordered to support the infantry by destroying German emplacements. Tank crews are given their assignments. Tanks move up on the flank. By a covered route, the infantry moves toward the jump-off position. Disperse and take individual cover. One goes into a hull defilade position, while another takes high ground. The other tanks move into selected positions. This driver knows natural growth shouldn't be disturbed, but sometimes it's unavoidable. By direct fire, trained armored force gunners clear obstacles for their infantry teammates. To overcome resistance, this mortar squad moves up to furnish close support during the assault. Resistance overcome, our troops move ahead.
The Volturno River, swollen by torrential rains. Our engineers, faced with the problem of getting troops and equipment across, had to span this water quickly, hampered by wind, rain, and cold. They established abutment sites with rock. Now the steel treadway was laid on rubber pontons. Trained men, wet and freezing, fight against time. To reinforce the bridge, they lash lines to trees on the bank. To alleviate stress and strain, the ropes were anchored wherever possible. anchors were cast into the riverbed at intervals appropriate to the velocity of the current. But the fury of the river increased, and there's a limit to the pounding a ponton bridge can take. And the bridge gave way. Steel girders twisted and pontons washed ashore like toy balloons. The alert crew rescue one of their men, half frozen. A new construction job necessary. Bulldozers push back the mud for new abutments. While trucks sloughed through the mire, bringing up material. Steel trestles are anchored onto the riverbed. This one holds. The new bridge is completed. These men licked this roaring torrent. They're trained.
Dark, dank, impenetrable undergrowth. Mines blasting, machine gun bullets coming from nowhere. These men are training for the toughest kind of warfare. Rope ladders to scale precipitous cliffs. Rope bridges to cross impassable streams. Now they're only Roman candles, with a hot foot to remind them where the shrapnel might come. The swaying, swinging tightrope span at dizzy heights is a test for any man's sense of balance. Coordination of every muscle is essential. This is preparation. This is a test of fitness. And the good soldier fights as hard to learn as he does to win. Did you get that? The good soldier fights as hard to learn as he does to win. And here's what they're training for. Invasion. Cape Gloucester, on the island of New Britain, early morning. B-24s, the softening process. Bombs away. Jap pillboxes blasted, crumbling under the weight of our high explosive. The coastline is covered with smoke to prevent aimed fire by the Japs and to hide our approach. In perfect teamwork, our Navy goes into action to blast the beaches. Under this cover, the convoy of troops and equipment moves in. Boats are lowered. The men fill them quickly and silently and move away from the nets as soon as they're in the boat. Notice how important it is to be skilled in going down the nets. The Higgins boats are crowded but orderly. The rifles are slung loosely, ready for action. The first wave hits. They move rapidly but in perfect order. Don't stumble. It's important to stay on your feet at a time like this. Use a wide stride. Continued air support as the enemy is pushed further inland. Reinforcements and heavy equipment move in. Men move ashore quickly, keeping their weapons high and dry. Trucks loaded with men and equipment roll from the bellies of ships. Tanks ready for action. Supplies are unloaded and moved up. The invasion moves inland through the swamps. Men neck deep in water, carry ammunition on their shoulders to keep it dry. That goes for the weapons, too. No time here to field strip a rifle. Signal Corps troops, alert for snipers, lay wire. A field switchboard is quickly set up. Communications must be established between units. Quick thinking counts here. Vital messages to be relayed on. And while you're doing this, keep your shirt on, soldier. Keeping the body covered is added protection against malaria. And now a cautious advance on Jap positions. Men properly dispersed. With mortars to help cover their advance. Sights checked constantly. Tanks blast their way forward. The men follow closely, protected by this wall of moving steel. They fan out. No ground left uncovered. The dense undergrowth is combed with fire. The result? Death and destruction. Planes that will never fly again. And as the troops dig in, wounded are cared for immediately. The bombers return to their bases. Gloucester is ours. Training pays off.
Then we were yanked out for a rest, but our biggest job lay yet ahead, the invasion of the Japanese homeland. However, before we could get going again, a little gadget called the atom bomb brought peace. Nice collection, eh? We got our share and more. More than we thought we'd get when we joined the 43rd early in 1941. What does it take to get a Purple Heart? General Washington said it takes valor. Our ancestors showed plenty of valor in the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, the Spanish-American War, in World War I. Only they weren't called the 43rd then. There were only a few regiments of civilian soldiers, volunteers of the New England National Guard from Maine, Vermont, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. The 103rd Infantry, the 169th Infantry, and the 172nd Infantry. Some of them with history dating back more than 100 years. That was long before they called us the Winged Victory Division. Let's be frank. Back in 1941, it didn't look like much of a victory, and we didn't look much like the division which was later called one of the finest commands in the Pacific. We used rubber balloons for guns and learned to paint the words machine gun instead of knocking one out. And speaking of winged victory, we didn't feel as if we had wings. Our feet hurt too much from marching, running, jumping, climbing. First in Camp Landing, Florida. then in Camp Shelby, Mississippi. General Hester, who was the boss of our outfit then, wasn't too happy about it. But when we left the States in October 1942, they gave us plenty of everything. Remember the phrase, arsenal of democracy? We must have half emptied it. Of course, we felt sort of strange when we moved through the Golden Gate. After all, we were still just a bunch of civilians in uniform. But there was also a feeling of excitement. One combat team was on the ill-fated President Coolidge, which was sunk at Espiritu Santo in the Hebrides, while the rest of us were kept as strategic reserve in New Caledonia, as a sort of welcoming committee for the Japs should they decide to pay us a visit. Strategic reserve, my eye, was just another word for training, for crawling in the dirt. And brother, we practically ate that dirt. We were getting tough and ready. When the Japs sent word they were too busy to keep our date, we moved up from New Caledonia. In February 1943, on the way to Guadalcanal, we started our collection of medals. The Japs sent us greetings by plane and torpedo, but by and large, it was only a mopping up operation, putting the finishing touches on a good job started by the Marines. We got our first medals for valor and wounds. Next, we invaded the Russell Islands in 1943. Maybe it wasn't much of an invasion, but it was worth the experience. It was a good rehearsal for our next job. Reorganized as a task force under General Hester, we were supposed to land on Rendova Island together with elements of the Navy and Marine Corps. It's funny what kind of thoughts go through your head once you know there's nothing between you and that coastline but a prayer. Advancing under fire. Establishing a beachhead. Unloading equipment. With those devils dropping hell on you. Backed by Navy support, we consolidated our position on Rendova Island and sat down for a few minutes to have some chow. Then the order came to move across the channel to Munda Airfield. Maybe I feel a little bitter about Munda Airfield. For 31 days we bled for every inch we advanced, moving through rain and mud, fighting against heavily fortified and camouflaged positions. Yes, Munda Airfield brings back some bitter memories. We got quite a number of medals for valor and wounds. But Munda was ours, repaired and enlarged as a base for our planes. And so was Arundel Island, after 50 more days of sweat and blood. They took us to New Zealand to forget all about it. The fellow had a chance to relax a little in those days. We played a little too. Although we knew darn well it wouldn't last long when replacements started coming, it meant we were getting ready for a new mission. General Red Wing was now our boss, a tough soldier graduated from the Doughfoots. He was the one who gave us that name, the Winged Victory Division. The funniest name a bunch of doughboys ever had. We sure did that name proud when we landed at Itapi in July 1944. The landing itself was easy, but there were some fireworks after we landed. Plenty of fireworks. There were 80,000 Japs and only 20,000 of us. But our equipment was good and so was our morale. The Japs must have thought we were crazy, but we kept going. They attacked us across the Drinamore. That's the name of a river. You had to be quite a linguist to tell where your buddy fell. But don't worry, our Japanese friends learned in a hurry to understand the language of our guns. We smoked them out of their holes like rats. And we kept going, sort of a constitutional, you might say, with a shower every day and a beauty nap after lunch, mud pack and all. Things sort of eased up when Christmas came around, or so we thought. It was the third Christmas we had spent away from home. The third Christmas. For many of us, the last. On New Year's Eve, we were on our way to the Philippines as part of the invasion force. Yes, we made a number of New Year's resolutions. Number one was we were going to land on Lingayen Gulf, Luzon. It was the kind of a campaign that sticks in your memory, the kind you keep dreaming about long after it's over. Some dreams. We'll never forget those kamikazes. Our first troops landed on the morning of January 9th with orders to seize the left flank in order to block off the Japanese in the mountains of Baguio. We had to slug it out inch by inch over mountains, rivers, swamps, jungles. Then our wings carried us south to Fort Stotzenburg, which we helped liberate. But we didn't have time to stay for the ceremony, for we were doing our share at Clark Field and the rugged mountains that flanked the field on the north. The boys who keep the records will tell you we killed more Japs than all the other divisions that fought on Luzon. But don't let anybody tell you we were the only ones who did the fighting. We would have been lost in the Zambales Mountains without the guerrillas and the native scout troops. The Japs were getting desperate, but nobody could stop us now. We moved south and tackled the famous Shimbu line at Antipolo east of Manila, sweeping to a junction with the 1st Cavalry Division southeast of Laguna de Bay. Then to Ipoh Dam, which was the main source of Manila's water supply. We blasted the Shinsu Fortress and secured Ipoh Dam intact. Then we were yanked out for a rest, but our biggest job lay yet ahead, the invasion of the Japanese homeland. However, before we could get going again, a little gadget called the atom bomb brought peace. We put in a stretch as occupation troops in Japan. We were back at swinging a stick instead of a bayonet. Finally, we started on our voyage home. Back through the Golden Gate. 3 years older, years wiser, minus many of our buddies, plus a lot of medals. The voices that cheered us in San Francisco were the voices of America, the America we had fought for in 4 campaigns that won us 2 Congressional Medals of Honor, 1 Distinguished Service Medal, 75 Distinguished Service Crosses, and a collection of Silver Stars and Purple Hearts. We were a happy bunch of soldiers, for we had done our job in the bloodiest war of history, and we had done it well. And now we are home again. New England, once again a part of the National Guard. Citizen soldiers, ready to serve our country whenever we are needed, whenever we are called.